Hi guys, this is Allison from Alleycat Creations. How are you? Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel if you have yet to do so. And if you get anything from my work, a connect the dot, an epiphany, a mind explosion, a new book to read, a new author to explore, please support me so I can keep this channel up. All the links are at the bottom of the description in the underneath the video. And if you are looking for some crazy different offshoot type of gift, this one just came out of the mold yesterday. Skulls. Pyramids. Mini itty bitty pyramids. Business card holders. Artwork. All that fun stuff is on my website, alleycatcreations211.com. And if you are in the Northwest Indiana area and you're near Maryville, I will be showing Saturday a lot of these pieces at their art summit. Very excited, been working overload the last couple of days on getting things looking professional. So you can come between 12 and 4 at the Maryville Library on US 30. And I'll be there from 12 to 4, showcasing my art, and I'll be there to hang out and hopefully meet some of you lovely people. The Message of Aquaria is our book today. It's going to be fun. The Sheep and the Goats. This should be a fantastic read. Quote, "When the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory, and before him shall be gathered all nations, and he shall separate them one from another, as a shepherd divideth his sheep from the goats, and he shall set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on his left hand." End quote, St. Matthew. From the immemorial, the sheep and the goats have been the symbol of good and evil. Just as in occultism, the terms right hand and left hand have indicated white and black magic. Yet we find man created with two hands, and were we to say that since the left hand is a sign of evil, we will cut it off. Such a mutilation would deter rather than help us onward in our evolution. Instead, we must recognize that man is created to be the master over both good and evil until he becomes as one of us, knowing both, as the Elohim said in the beginning. For he must conquer not only the dangers of self-aggrandizement, self-deception, and spiritual pride, which lurk in that which is called good, but he must also extract or turn to useful and constructive ends the power and force which manifests in that which we call evil, so that by the blending of both forces, he can rule his life, even as by the use of his two hands, he accomplishes his work in the physical world. Pause. I have an episode about the right hand and the left hand, but what they're describing is something I talk so much about on my channel in the Spiritual Soul Advices, is that you come to a neutral point, and then you choose which side of the pendulum you want to swing in the extremes of how you want to swing it. We need both. We live in polarity. We live in duality. We need both, and the both teaches us and guides us through the wisdom that we need to obtain in order to move forward. You're the Satan in someone's story. You're the evil asshole in someone's story. Someone perceived you in a really bad light, and that's theirs to claim and own, not you. But you have to have both natures within one being. You have to. And you have to acknowledge that shadow self. You have to go in and do the shadow work. You need to do you authentically. So if you have a blustery attitude or a personality that is just a little bit blunt, that's the design that God gave through you to have an experience. Nothing to shun. We all have those attitudes and judgments and negativity that is within us. We have anger. Things make us angry. It's how you choose to react to that anger and choose to transmute it that is all the worth the lesson. But we need to have both. And we have to understand that both needs to exist, at least here. In the larger cosmic sense, good and evil are but the opposite poles of a mighty magnet, the magnetism of which is the outpouring of the creative life or Christ principle, the Son of the Godhead. In this sense, what is called darkness and evil is but the absence of light and life. There is also the passive resistance which the dense vibrations of matter offer to the quickening vibrations of spirit. For the personal aspect of evil, as being not merely this negative absence of light and good, but a positive creation of inharmony made by man through the misuse of the God-given materials and the perversion of the God-given forces of the universe, is not the sense in which the word evil is used in this chapter. We are using the word here only in its cosmic sense of the opposite pole of good. So true. The two ends of a magnet are charged with what appear to be two antagonistic forces, or forces working in diametrically opposite ways. At one end they attract, at the other they repel. Yet all the time each end is attracting and polarizing the forces from its opposite end until in the middle we find the peace and calm of perfect balance and equilibrium. So with good and evil, the sheep and the goats, since the days when the assembled Elohim pronounced the fiat, let there be light, and sent down this mighty magnet of duality, positive and negative, active and passive, good and evil, right and left, sheep and goats, men and women have struggled with their destiny, each apparently along opposite lines. Yet, to the careful thinker, there is so great an interblending of the two that one of the greatest problems of the age is to untangle them. Therefore, let us try to decipher the meaning of the allegory quoted at the head of this lesson. Since we are taught that the book of nature holds for us the solution of all our problems, let us go to her as to a mother and to learn from her. We find that the sheep was domesticated before the dawn of history, and since the earliest days, sheep, flocks, and herds have been represented wealth and good living. The sheep has supplied man with clothing, its wool being among the earliest fibers to be woven into cloth. It has also fed, hang on guys. It has also fed him by giving its life for him, for because of its gentleness and docile, the sheep was probably the first animal killed for the food for primitive man. In this, it exemplified the great drama of sacrifice, the laying down of its lower form of life that a higher form man might manifest, just as animal man or the lower personality gives up its life, that the divine man may manifest through him. The goat, too, has served man generously from the earliest ages. From the remains of the Asiatic goat have been found in the Pliocene fossil beds of India. The Angora and Kashmir goats produce the finest quality of hair as well as highly prized milk. In fact, in the Vale of Kashmir, the weaving of rugs and cloth from the wool of these goats forms the principal industry. At one time, there being over 16,000 looms at work in a comparatively small area. But the goat, while feeding and clothing men, does not ordinarily lay down its life for him, although of late goat meat is being used extensively in the South. This is an important point of difference between the use of sheep and the goats. In reality, both belong to the same family, in fact, are but the two ends of one magnet, as it were, and like all magnets, blend into each other in the middle, where the good points of each are separated from the evil and the balance. The Cyclopedia Britannica thus describes the goat, although the more typical goats are markedly distinct from sheep, there is but a regards wild and domesticated forms, an almost complete graduation from goats to sheep, so that it is exceedingly difficult to differ and define each group. Again, while we are apt to think that the Bible utterly condemns the goat, nevertheless, in the Proverbs of Solomon, the wise, we find the goat cataloged among the four animals that are excellent, the four being the lion, the greyhound, and the goat, and the king who has no risen up, or who knows how to govern. Also, in the Hermetic philosophy, we find the goat among the three animals used in its sacred symbology, the goat representing fire, while the bull stands for earth or salt, and the dog for mercury or fluid, air, and water. On the great day of expiration, the elders of Israel presented two goats to the high priest, one to be slain for the sacrifice and the others to be driven into the wilderness, the name Azazel being given to the latter. The ceremony of the scapegoat was followed by many ancient peoples, but in Israel the custom was as follows. Two goats were led into the inner temple and presented to the high priest on the north side of the altar, one being placed on his right and the other on his left. An urn was then set down between them, and two lots were cast into it, made either of wood, silver, or gold. On one lot was engraved for the Lord, on the other for Azazel. After the urn had been well shaken, the priest put both hands in at the same time and drew forth a lot in each. The one in his right hand decided the fate of the goat on his right, while that in his left hand decided the fate of the one on his left. After drawing, the priest fastened a long piece of narrow scarlet ribbon to form the horns of Azazel as a sign that it was to become the scapegoat. After the sacrifice of the goat set aside for the Lord, the scapegoat was brought to the high priest, who then placed his hands upon its head and confessed his sins and those of the people. The goat was then driven out into the wilderness, and if possible, was left near the brink of a precipice, carrying the sins of the people, the sins being symbolized by the scarlet ribbon. It is to this symbology that the text refers. Though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Though they be red like crimson, they shall be as wool. For the goat dedicated to the Lord was washed pure and white before the sacrifice. Under the name of Baphomet, the goat is used as a symbol of black magic and the devil. Yet a deeper understanding of the figure as it is pictured reveals a high symbolism and indicates that even that which is evil is ultimately used to bring about some measure of good, although that end might have and should have been obtained without the manifestation of the evil. For on the forehead of this image, which is a composite embodying the figure of a goat, we see the pentacle with its point up, the unqualified and universal sign of light and humanity. His two arms are the position of occultism. With his right hand, he points up in the case symbolizing man's ability to soar into the heavens and draw from on high the power to complete the development of his God powers, his destiny. while with his left hand he points down, symbolizing his power to reach down and help his fellow men and the kingdom below him, his work. For man must ultimately learn that to make his work most effective, esoteric truth or soul wisdom from on high must the foundation of all his efforts to uplift humanity. This position of the hand is called that of the justice of mercy. Between the horns of the figure burns the torch of intelligence, the magical light of which shall bring about equilibrium, or the soul exalted above in illuminating matter, even when manifesting within it the flame of divine love, which shows man the path to mastery. The head and face of this monster, which has earned for him the name of the devil, in reality expresses but the horror of sin and the realization of man that he alone is responsible for whatever results from his misuse of the forces of nature. Over the navel is the globe, showing that through that center he is in touch with the lower worlds, while the generative organs are replaced by the caduceus, the symbol of transmutation and eternal life. Also of the two opposite poles of the magnet becoming balanced and blended and passing up the central staff. His breast symbolized that humanity is fed spiritually from the breast of the Great Mother. Over his right shoulder is a light crescent moon, symbolizing the overshadowing power of intuition given for his guidance, while beneath his left hand is a dark crescent moon, symbolizing the astral power of the moon used in black magic. The moon is a dead planet and yet a living body, for while the planet itself is dead, yet like a decaying corpse, its particles are full of active destructive life forces. Hence, during the dark of the moon, it is the force of these corpse-like emanations which lends its aid to all black magical practices. Necromancy and sorcery seek to utilize these forces, much as they seek to call up the forms of the dead to do their bidding. But when the moon is full orbed, it not only reflects the light of the sun to the earth, but back of the moon as well as back of the sun are situated two of the three sacred orbs or secret planets, known to the masters from old time, yet absolutely unknown as yet to modern science. When the moon is full, a ray of the light from the sacred orb is blended with a ray from the sacred orb back of the sun, and a force called the Sushuma ray is transmitted to the earth. From this blended light, as many and wonderful occult properties accredited to the full-orbed moon, it has called the mystery of mysteries, and by the Egyptians was identified both with Isis and Osiris. In the Book of the Dead, Osiris was said to inhabit the moon and is represented as saying, I will issue by day the full of the moon to do that I have to do amongst the living. The Egyptians held a festival at the time of the full moon to celebrate the ingress of Osiris, the god of life, into the moon, which they called the symbol of the renewal of life to the earth and reincarnation to the soul of man. Yet the moon in Egypt was also made the ruler over magic and enchantments. And during its dark period, as fully understood by all the ancient teachers, it sends forth an unholy emanation. The concealed or secret side of the moon was called the infernal regions and named Tiao, the path of the night sun. In very truth, the concealed side of the moon is that which has been called the eighth sphere of our earth chain. And when during the sixth and seventh sub-races of the seventh great race, the now visible moon disappears from our sight, the dark repository of Earth's leftovers will begin its preparation for a new spiral of evolution. Hence, today, light and darkness are struggling within its womb. Those of us who can understand this mystery can do much help on evolution by correlating with the mystic light and letting the separation of the evil in the seething, melting pot of time fulfill its work. As a whole, therefore, Baphomet symbolizes black magic only when interpreted negatively. In other words, only as man perverts the very powers given him by which to climb to the gods. Everything, pause, everything has good and evil. Even the evil people that we seek to say that they're true, pure evil still has good in them. It is a choice of where you feed your energy and how you feed your energy. We've been programmed with these inversions. I'm not saying, oh, bow to Baphomet, because he's manifested here in our here and now as evil. I'm not saying to, oh, he's all of a sudden to the light. But it's, like I say in many of my spiritual soul advices, we wrote this story to manifest and play out here. Is it really so? We argue over the occult symbolism and we argue over these things, but these things were taken and inverted. The true meanings of things have been inverted to make us think that it's negative and evil and oh my goodness. So until we kind of shed that crap and come into neutrality, the balancing of both poles and understanding the significance of symbolism and what they were trying to teach and tell us, maybe we will stop feeding the narrative and feeding that agenda and transmutating all that we find inverted to the light. Possibly, we'll see. The celestial sign of the zodiac Capricorn, symbolized by the goat, is the most mystical of all the signs, and although much has been written of its meaning and potencies, still little is really explained as to the esoteric significance, and even now only hints as to its deeper meanings can be given out. In the Hindu zodiac, this sign is known as Markara and is referred to the crocodile. In reality, its meaning is the same as the goat, which is usually pictured as a half-aquatic monster. The sign was formerly the 8th sign of the zodiac instead of being the 10th as it's present, but it always had the same mystical meaning and was always represented by a monster that was half terrene and half aquatic, with a dual nature representing the dual forces of fire and water, like Baphomet, symbolizing both the micro and the macrocosm of man and the universe. It is therefore not at all remarkable that most mystical and little understood sign and symbols should be relegated to black magic. For what man does not understand, he fears, and what he fears, he endows with sinister motives and evil powers, then tries to appropriate through fear instead of understanding through love. Bing effing go. Bingo. Bingo. I'm going to reread that. Bingo. It is therefore not at all remarkable that this most mystical and little understood sign and its symbols should be relegated to black magic. For what man does not understand, he fears. And what he fears, he endows with sinister motives and evil powers, then tries to propagate through fear instead of understanding through love. Bingo. This is and ever has been the true origin of devil worship. Even the most revered and adorned of Christian symbols, the crucifix, it turned upside down because of black magic symbol and is used in certain cults. The dreaded Baphomet, or the goat of Mendes, as he is sometimes called, in his true meaning, therefore, represents man in his highest obtainment of power, becoming to the extent that he rules over the beast within himself, the aspirant to godhood. This symbol also indicates man's oneness with the whole created universe and further points out that it is only through correlation with the one life, through the ruling of the positive and negative phases of the creative force, or lifting up of two serpents upon the rod of power, that the Christ can be born in man and bring forth in him, as it has already done in the universe. During the reign of this mystical sign of the goat, Capricorn, December 21st to January 20th, the birthday of the Christ is celebrated. This again indicates the transmutation of gold from dross, or the separation of the sheep from the goats. For out of the very throne of Satan, Saturn, which rules the first decadent of Capricorn, the Christ child is brought into the world. Since Jesus is represented as being born in the sign of the tester, we need not wonder that he says, "Think not that I am come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword." From the above, we can gain understanding of the great mystery set forth in the few cryptic sentences of the passage quoted as applied to the birth of Jesus and man. When the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory. The glory of victory, of perfect equilibrium. His throne of glory is the point of blending, when all the opposing manifestations of forces are gathered up, indrawn, and the full experience of both extremes is balanced and registered. At this point, man, as the Lord of creation, must blend himself with the universe. His holy angels are the divine spiritual forces and helpers with which man has correlated and whose help has enabled him to garner the golden grains of wisdom from all his experiences in the fields of the outer life, where the tares and the wheat have been allowed to grow side by side until the time of harvest. Before him shall be gathered all nations, all the manifestations of the great evolutionary force expressing as good and evil, and the Christ man standing in the point of balance shall separate the conflicting elements one from another. All that is good, all that has yielded its positive qualities towards strengthening and perfecting humanity, all that has been transmuted into pure gold and given of its innate riches for the betterment of the world, all that has been put to its highest use. In short, all that has been separated from its dross and purified, he will put on his right hand, that it may lend its positive creative force to the reconstruction first of his life, then of society and all mankind, that it may point man to his highest ideal and help to unfold his God powers. All that remains, the dross, the weak, negative, and hampering qualities that have for so long prevented or hindered the Christ from manifesting in this life, he will put on his left hand, which he points down as a sign of his dominion over all negative aspects, instead of permitting them to have dominion over him. He will then say to these leftovers, this dross, out of which he has extracted the gold of experience, these husks, out of which he has gathered their kernel of truth. Depart from me, ye workers of iniquity. I have no longer need for you. I know you have served your purpose, hence I will see that you also have an opportunity to pass through the fire of transmutation, the everlasting fire prepared for the beginning, not for anything that is good. For all that has been separated, I have gathered in my right hand. I have gathered it out of the burning and have forged with it my staff of life, my rod of power, But for the devil, the man created thought forms of evil. See, we created it. And his angels, the thought forms created by the superstitious practices and perversions of force and orgies, which prolong the devil's life and give him power to become the great adversary. Unto all those forces and conditions, I say, depart from me into the everlasting fire, purification, the fire that remains unquenchable as long as man creates fuel to feed its flames, yet which is the only element that can overcome the resistance and transmute that which we call evil into good. Mic drop. The fire is raging even in the physical world today. Its full fury will let loose on the battlefields of Europe. Yet in its very midst, from out the heart of its lurid flames, the Christ man is being born from the world, the Christ who shall sit on his throne of glory and separate the sheep from the goats, the good from the evil. For both are a part of the great magnet of life, and each must lend its true force and substance to blend with the other, that a perfect balance and equilibrium may be prepared as a throne glory against his coming. Not only in the world is this true throne of glory being set up, but in every heart which is preparing him room. All must prepare for his coming by separating the sheep from the goats, while standing still in the center balance, the two forces, calling their sheep by name, and also recognizing the work the goats can accomplish. Therefore, in our personal lives, we must recognize that the goats are but the other sheep. For other sheep I have, which are not of this fold, them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice and shall be one fold and one shepherd. The everlasting fire is a manifestation of divine law, that which is forever changing the outer forms of expression. The vital life may be released and taken on new and more glorious expressions. Could we have consciously watched the formation of this globe when it was but a mass of fire mist, which writhed and swirled in space, or later on, that when a denser but molten mass is seethed and bubbled and belched forth disaster, would we not say, what an awful hell God has made for a man to dwell in? Yet those stages were a necessary preparation for the world and life, beauty we all see around us today. Man in his evolution must follow the same law. First, separateness, each man apparently a separate atom striving to find his own place, drawn by the irresistible attraction of something he scarce knows what, all scurrying around and around. Then come burning and harrowing disasters in the conditions of the outer life, which make it a venerable melting pot, all engulfed in an apparently molten mass of sickening sorrow and death. Yet out of it, there shall finally arise a new and beautiful humanity, each man and woman, like each flower, tree, bird, and animal, perfect in its own way, yet all working harmoniously together to make life for all a perfected whole. Then there will be no jealous effort to compile a violet to become the oak, or a sunflower a rose, but all will lend of their God-given powers toward a mighty manifestation of the Christ, who has come in his glory to sit on his throne and rule forever. The beautiful picture given us in the 23rd Psalm is not mere poetic imagery, but a deep mystical truth expressed in the most beautiful symbology. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He marketh me to lie down in the green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. The divine law of love is indeed a shepherd of souls. And once a soul has heard its voice and has followed, that is, has come one with the law, he finds this loving guidance a deep and abiding reality. Hence that soul wants nothing but to follow on elsewhere the voice leads. He maketh his followers to lie down in the green pastures of abundant earth conditions, where the supply is no longer scanty and hard to obtain. For once having learned that he, law of love, is fullness of plenty, we find the pastures green, yet we are content to lie down at his command, no longer running to and fro, bleating plaintively for flood or for worldly things, but resting quietly on the law. Then doth it lead us beside the waters of life that are no longer turbulent, that no longer gush forth from the eyes as tears. For the eyes now are clearly the glory of the shepherd who leadeth us. No longer is the great mother force or the mystical water of life by which we evolve Godward wasted in emotional storms. For in the following the loving shepherd, so still do we find all the earthly desires and emotions that in a moment, by turning our attention inward with a loving thought of our oneness with the greatest law, we seem to be lying down like contented sheep to deep green grass beside a still mountain lake. And upon the surface of our tranquil mind, the reflection of our shepherd's face is imaged, even as are the clouds upon the bosom of the lake. Another application of the allegory of the sheep and the goats is to the two types we find among followers of Christ's life. The sheep are those gentle and docile souls who follow unthinkingly in flocks wherever they are led, who must have a shepherd and a sheepfold wherein they are carefully protected from the wolves, who follow their shepherd lovingly, yet who will follow just as blindly one who would lead them to the verge of the precipice, or one who would fly and leave the sheep to their fate when the wolf appears. The other class, represented by the goats, think for themselves. They wander forth from the sheepfold of church, creed, dogma, and organization, courageously and independently seeking substance from the sparse herbage which they find on the rocky mountainside as they climb. They are always ready to face whatever comes, for they are well armed with two strong horns, symbol of power, upon their heads, and are quite able to keep the wolves at bay. Both these types are followers of the great law, and somehow, sometime, instead of either one fearing or despising the other, they must find that they both belong to the one family and each has the same shepherd. Therefore, they must find the point of balance where they can partake of the virtues of the other and eliminate their weakness. Pause. Hi, my political friends. How are you? This is how the evil divided, how we chose to divide, how we judge and label others. So there is division and separateness. It is up to us, the goats, to bring the sheep together with us. It's okay to have differing opinions. It's okay to be led astray. We all have been led astray at some point in our lives. And what is fourth? Density. Merely compassion and unconditional love. For all is spoken one word in the oneness, in the unity consciousness. That doesn't exclude anybody, and that also includes the people who are of the dark. It doesn't exclude them either. We are one with all of it. Remember, I keep saying source has two aspects, two magnetic poles, positive and negative, that have to coexist in this reality. So which one are you choosing to play? Most of us who watch me are choosing the light, but there might be people who have darkness within them that is being illuminated to get them out of the darkness. In order to understand the light, you need to be in the darkness. You need to see its brilliance. Well, many of us have had tough, extraordinarily hard and rough lives because in that darkness, we created our light to shine. We made it. If you don't know from one side, you won't know from the other. That's how this reality works. So instead of shaming, blaming, pointing fingers, and calling people out, and yes, there are people who do wrong things. I'm not saying don't call that out. They will come to justice, but there are lots of people who think differently from you that you poo-poo and feed negative shit to, well, you got to stop. We got to unify both sides. That's also politically. That's what's heating up in our center right now. We all need to come to center. We need to look at both sides and say, where can we move forward from? People are calling those other people sheep. Yeah, they all flocked in one direction for their divine purpose. That's what they were supposed to do. That doesn't mean they're any separate or less than. When we stop name calling people, when we come to center, when you see the bigger picture, you see how God is trying to teach us, because that's the experience that God wanted through each and every one of us. Some of us were the black sheep. We were the goats. We were the ones that went the other direction. That was for a purpose. That's for our own purpose. But a lot of the people that we are around are the sheep, just flocking to any shepherd that's going to lead them somewhere. It may be astray. We don't know. But this is our time to step up and bring both flocks together and to honor the shepherd that's up, that made us and created us. We flock to one. So let's steer it toward the light. That's what's needed. This is one of the most profound chapters I have read from them thus far. Because when you feed into the black magical, the satanic, Khazarian, this and that, and we give it names, we're giving it energy. I know it's difficult, especially for me, to not feed into what everybody else is saying, because yeah, I don't want these people moving forward with negative intentions that are still going to harm humanity. I don't want that either. But we need to understand how it was inverted in the first place and stop feeding that inversion. I'm not saying to bow down to a demon. We wrote that. We put that demon here. We're the ones that have to take it out. We manifest these things. We made these stories collectively together. And now that we have the awareness, we have to undo those inversions because it no longer works here anymore. We're moving forward. That story is going to stay there while our moving forward, we got to let it go. So we stop manifesting this shit. We got to transmute. That's what many of us are here for, is the transmutation of energy coming from a neutral state. Just be aware of these things, because I see a lot of people who are very still stuck in the programming of religious doctrine and texts, that you continuously through the programming, you're not following or reading it anymore, but yet you're still emoting it, walking through it, still judging people over it. We got to end that. The idea is not that some people are to be considered as sheep and are elected to stand at the right hand of God, while others are to be looked upon as goats, which are to be cast out into the wilderness or into the burning, but that each one must reach that at one with the great law, where we not only recognize that we have within us both the qualities symbolized, but must wisely separate the one from the other and yet use the good from each. And since with our right hand we accomplish on earth, the right hand needs as helpers and servants to express its forces only the sheep, those faculties and forces which will follow faithfully and docilely wherever they are bidden by the shepherd, which will lie down at his command, even in the midst of earth's greenest pastures, which will tranquilly rest besides the still waters in the quiet yet exalted state of meditation, which feeds the soul abundantly, even as the green pastures fed the sheep. But after we have learned to make the differentiation, we must not forget that we need the help of the goats as well, for we must use the power of our left hand to dominate in the inner forces. These cannot so easily be led and made to lie down tranquilly. In fact, we must go forth and seek them, even in the clefts of the rocks where herbage is scarce. We must often climb high mountains of intellectuality and material conditions and call the goats to us. And only as we seek them with the love of the Christ will they trust and obey us, for they naturally tend to wander at will, despise the seduction of soft places. Hence, we need these forces to dominate earth conditions if we are to accomplish our work in the world in the face of its hard, rocky conditions and the sparseness of its spiritual herbage. We must therefore resolutely face the conditions surrounding us and do our full duty in the world and to the world, correlating with our fellows against the aggression of the human wolves who would fatten on the flock. We thus must do by displaying the vigilant courage of our convictions, the tenacity of our purpose, and the warmth and radiance of the spirit derived from our inner nourishment. For all this, we need the force of the goats, or those qualities and mystical ideals which make for strength and endurance, and which each give us the ability to climb over all obstacles, even though we can see no clearly marked sheep trail to follow, so that in spite of yawning chasms and the treacherous footing, we can find our way to the very top of the mount of attainment. Hence, only he who can stand at the point of balance and both use these forces can sit on the throne of his glory. Holy crap. Mind blown. I say the same things. We need to find balance within ourselves, the inner and outer world. What are you doing today to get those in balance? It's not easy in human form with the programmings, agendas being slung and flung at us at all directions. We need to objectively take the emotional attachments to these material things and the outside world and our inside projections of what we were indoctrinated with. It's a battle. Not everything that you come across is of your betterment. You got to make those decisions. You need to see if the flock is moving in the right direction to move with it. We need to understand the deeper meanings and the deeper levels of consciousness to grasp what is it that we all seek. And when we all combined in unity together to seek peace and harmony, we need to balance both sides. We need to come to neutrality. That's why I practice divine neutrality. It's not an easy route, but it's the route to source itself, because it's made up of both components as we are. So what side are you choosing? Or are you going straight toward the middle line? You got to understand both and know of both and be struck in both to understand the experience, to gain the wisdom. We've been there. A lot of us have been there. And a lot of us have done that. So now we need to impart that wisdom onto other people. So when they're going through the thick of their lives, they can see a better light and balance themselves. One of the best chapters, I didn't butcher too bad, but one of the best chapters these guys have put out thus far. In all the books I have read, that was one of the most powerful ones. Because we are all programmed to think certain symbolism is a black magic and the dark arts, and this is negative and that's bad and they're evil and this is this, when in reality, that symbolism is actually of light. We made it, we've defined it as darkness. We got to change the definitions on things and how we feed our energy to it. Bashar talks about that all the time. It's the definition you give to things. If a whole populace is claiming this is evil, it becomes thus. When we stop to think what is actually lying behind that symbolism, why do you think certain symbols was adopted in certain cultures as peace and prosperity, and then negated when someone of a darker force took it over, and now no one's allowed to use it because it is evil? World War II symbolism, just, I'm not going to say the word, but we know what that symbol means. And it was used in ancient times as peace and prosperity. So what changed? So we got to look at that symbol and apply that understanding to, oh, this was really good and it meant really good in so many cultures, shows up in so many places in archaic architecture and artwork of the ancient past. Then it was adopted into something else that mind screwed everybody, and now we see it as evil when the original intention was positive. So let's take that example that they showed about the Baphomet and how the evil side decided that it was going to define it differently. Thus, we all marched along that route. Not everything you see is evil. Not everybody who works for evil people are evil. Sometimes we have to use our inner judgment and discernment to understand how people have to play the game. And sometimes people have to do nefarious things in order to get in order to get the juicy contents of the underworkings. You see this all the time. So stop judging others. You don't need to trust them. You don't need to listen to them. Don't make a judgment about them. You don't know. So guys, I'm sending each and every one of you love, light, compassion, grace, shielding, and protective energy. Please go within, be the lighthouse for everybody, be the GPS signal that emanates beautiful, loving energy. Please be safe, be seen. Please go watch some of my TikToks. The channel will be linked below. I am trying to do little short snippets of what I get channeled on a daily basis, or things that come to mind that need to be addressed. I might have to chop this video down and do a TikTok on what I read was. Again, if you are in the Northwest Indiana area and you're near Maryville, US 30, Saturday, the 1st, I will be presenting my artwork at their art summit from 12 to 4. Please come support if you can. I would love to meet some of the people that are in this region that tell me they're in Indiana. And if you're free, come and say hi, and I would love to meet you. And thank you for supporting me, my artwork, and just trying to get what my mission here on earth is to help seed people and help expand your minds and your thinking. You don't need to agree with me or align with me. It's just the expansion. It's just thinking differently. It's putting that out there and putting it on the table. So with that, guys, please be safe, be seen, and I'll see you on the next ones. Bye for now.